A blockbuster trade proposal for the Phoenix Suns that would send two of their starting players. In return, they would be receiving two other starting pieces that could also impact the youth movement for this team. We are going to break down this potential trade with the Phoenix Suns and the Chicago Bulls right here on Suns Digest. Now, my name is CJ Pierre. Thanks for joining us, you guys. We have got a loaded show for you guys, as an insider is mocking a trade that is possible for the Phoenix Suns to make that could bring back some significant talent to the Suns. But would that upgrade the team? We're going to talk about it here on today's show. Before we get into that, about 82% of you guys are watching our videos, and we appreciate that, but you haven't subscribed to the channel just yet. If you want to make sure you're keeping up to date with all the latest Suns news and updates, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss a thing that we are going to have cooking up for you guys. Now, let's get into this trade proposal of the Suns to trading Bradley Beal and Jusuf Nurkic to the Chicago Bulls. This coming from the guys at Fadeaway World, and they're just putting out a proposal in terms of what the Suns can acquire with the Chicago Bulls, a team that many perceive to not really be going for a championship this upcoming season, and putting out a trade that could potentially improve the Suns, not just for the short term, but for the long term as well. And as the Suns would be giving up guys like Bradley Beal and Jusuf Nurkic potentially in this trade. Meanwhile, the Phoenix Suns will be getting back Zach LaVine and Nikola Vučević from the Chicago Bulls. Trader World giving us a little graphic of what it may look like with those two guys in on the squad as well. It is an interesting thing about. Let's take a look at the trade proposal that Fadeaway World came up with. The Suns would receive Zach LaVine and Nikola Vučević. Meanwhile, the Chicago Bulls would get Bradley Beal, Jusuf Nurkic, and two second-round picks that the Suns were able to acquire from the Denver Nuggets, one in 2026, the other in 2031. Now, let's just kind of, take a step back and just look at over the overall parameters of what a trade like this could mean. So Bradley Beal, Jusuf Nurkic, both starters on the Suns last season. Nikola Vučević, Zach LaVine, both starters on the Bulls. Now each duo, if you will, in this case, has their pros and cons in terms of individuals. Bradley Beal, former All-Star, former primary scorer with the Washington Wizards, comes to the Phoenix Suns, has a pretty disappointing year. He shoots well from the field, but he scores under 20 points per game, and then really kind of no-showed in the playoffs, was really shown up to high levels, being matched up against Anthony Edwards and the Minnesota Timberwolves. Jusuf Nurkic, similar situation, really overmatched in the post in the playoffs, guarding guys like Rudy Gobert and Karl Anthony Towns. Not really effective on the defensive end, and wasn't able to really find his footing in the Suns' offensive plans under former head coach Frank Vogel. That was last season. The Chicago Bulls, meanwhile, with Zach LaVine, dealing with multiple injury issues, the team in a constant state of fluctuation and rebuilding, guys hurt left and right, whether it's Kobe White or whether it had been Lonzo Ball. And then you have Nikola Vučević, who came over from the New Orlando Magic and had really shown himself to be a solid offensive player. Also has some limitations on the defensive side of the ball, but he has really been an offensive force, scoring nearly 18 points per game during his time with the Chicago Bulls, developing an outside game, really good in the post, and is a great rebounder on the boards as well. So those kind of break down what those guys individually are and what they could bring to the table as part of the team, you know, individually. Now, let's take a look at this trade proposal as we take a look at the trade machine and whether or not it could actually work. And if you see right here, according to Fanspo, this trade could be a success. Now, obviously, we don't have the picks in there, but just money for money, that trade would be a success. Now, we're going to break it down a little further and just say, would this trade help Phoenix? Is this the kind of trade that could help not only improve the Phoenix Suns for this upcoming season, but could improve them going down in the long term? Now, let's take a look at this, this trade machine again, and just take a look at one key thing that I would like to point out here, and that is the money aspect. Doing this trade, the Phoenix Suns would save $5.2 million against their cap. Now, the Phoenix Suns are a second neighbor team. They're spending the most money on everybody, but every little bit will help in the long run. And that's something that I think that's why one of the biggest reasons why this trade should be considered. Now, when you take a look at the individual contracts, Bradley Beal, scheduled to make over $50 million this upcoming season. Jusuf Nurkić over 18. Meanwhile, Zach LaVine scheduled to make over $43 million, while Nikola Vučević scheduled to make $20 million. Now, the length of the contracts is basically identical. The shooting guards got 3 years left on their deals. Jusuf Nurkić, Nikola Vučević, 2 years left on their deals. Now, when we're talking about talent for talent, according to Fanspo, they believe that the Bulls will be getting back more talent, more wins per capita with Beal and Nurkic, while the Suns will be getting back less wins with LaVine and Vučević. Now, I feel like that's a little bit more debatable, but I'll get into that in a little bit. Um, and then I think the other thing to really point out here, and that's kind of really the stickler for this whole thing in terms of why it probably would not work, is Bradley Beal's no trade clause in his contract. He would probably not accept a trade to the Chicago Bulls with his no trade clause. So that kind of puts the gum in the works. But we are going to go ahead and just say, what if Bradley Beal's fine with that trade? What if he wants to go somewhere where he can be the number one option, be the primary scorer, and maybe that's what he is more so considering? I think that would probably be an option that is more enticing to him, given what happened with him last season with the Phoenix Suns and what his future could be. Now, obviously, he could, has a better chance of winning a championship with the Phoenix Suns, so that's that one thing. But how would he be the most contributing factor last season? Average 18 points per game, 4.4 rebounds per game, 5 assists per game, shooting over 50% from the field, and 43% from 3-point range. But again, he was not the focal point of the team. He really, really struggled to find his fit. Now, obviously, injuries I know played a role in that, but in the playoffs, it just seemed like he did not really have a clear cut directive in terms of what he was supposed to do offensively with the Suns. And then he also struggled defensively, particularly when he was matched up against Anthony Edwards. Now, could that change with head coach Mike Budenholzer now at the helm? And could he do a better job of getting Bradley Beal involved? I think that is a high possibility. I think that Bradley Beal has a chance to improve with head coach Mike Budenholzer, but again, that remains to be seen. Now, let's take a look at Zach LaVine. Now, scoring wise, Zach LaVine has more so traditionally, as during his time in Chicago, have been an over 20 plus point per game scorer. That dipped a little bit once the Bulls acquired DeMar DeRozan, and he kind of took a backseat scoring wise on the offensive end to DeRozan. But Zach LaVine is more familiar with being secondary scorer with playing with DeRozan when he was with the Minnesota Timberwolves playing alongside Andrew Wiggins and Karl Anthony Towns. Last season with the Bulls, he averaged 19.5 points per game, 5.2 rebounds per game, also shooting about 45% from the field and about 34% from 3-point range. So LaVine traditionally not as great of a shooter as Bradley Beal. However, he is a little bit more dynamic on the offensive end, is able to get into the paint and attack the basket. He is also a better defender than Bradley Beal is, and I think that it is something that the Suns would consider in terms of who else they would put in that backcourt position with the guys like Tyus Jones and Devin Booker. Now let's take a look at the guys on the interior involved in this potential trade. And we'll start with Jusuf Nurkic. Now, Nurkic last season averaged about 10 points, 10.9 points per game, 11 rebounds per game. That's solid, but again, his main struggles were in the playoffs and what he showed on the defensive end. He wasn't very, very stout defensively, and the Minnesota Timberwolves dominated the glass in that series. And many times, Jusuf Nurkic got played off the court, and the Suns had to go or tried to go small, being that may have been their best option to combat what the Timberwolves were doing. And Jusuf Nurkic didn't really, was a contributing factor. Now, it looks like he's trying to change his game. He's trying to become a little bit more perimeter oriented. He's working on his 3-point shot, and all that's good and all that's great. But will he be able to put that into practice with the Phoenix Suns? Now, I've been saying that I think the addition of Tyus Jones and Mike Budenholzer will help Jusuf Nurkic probably more so than anyone else on the team, allowing him to really excel in pick and roll and hopefully hide some of his weaknesses in terms of his positioning on the court. And especially if he does develop that 3-point shot and he becomes a little bit more of a pick and pop, stretch five position, if you will, I think that could benefit his game very much so, and help the Phoenix Suns. However, I really think he pales in comparison in terms of what Nikola Vucevic is. I think Nikola Vucevic is a far more superior offensive player and fits so much better with the guys like Kevin Durant and Devin Booker and even Tyus Jones, for example. He's already got these aspects to his game, being a good pick and roll guy, being a good pick and pop guy, going to the basket and drawing fouls. He's a really good free throw shooter, shooting over 80% from free throws last season. Scored 18 points per game last year, also averaging over 10 rebounds per game. Vucevic is a double-double machine. He is probably one of the more underrated players in the NBA in terms of what he's able to provide. And I think that he is probably the key asset more so than even Zach LaVine. But I think if the Suns were to acquire, I think the Suns could come out, the winners in this hypothetical trade. So when you take a back, I'll take a look back at this Fanspo, trade, machine, and they projected that the Bulls kind of come out with the positive, adding more wins to the roster with Bradley Beal and Jusuf Nurkic. I push back on that. I think LaVine and Vucevic and their fit with the Phoenix Suns would actually probably be better than whatever Bradley Beal and Jusuf Nurkic end up bringing back to the Chicago Bulls. I think Vucevic already is a key fit for playing with guys like Tyus Jones, Devin Booker, and Kevin Durant in terms of his ability to space the floor, yet also be able to be a force inside the paint. He's also struggles defensively, just like Nurkic does. So there's that liability as well. But Vucevic is much more of a polished offensive player, much more dynamic, much more of a threat that could open more spaces for the other guys. Zach LaVine, he could come in and really be a spark plug, really do a lot of the dirty work. That's something that he actually is familiar with. It's not something that is, he's opposed to. He's got some ball handling skills as well, and he's a much better three-point shooter than last season showed as well. I do want to point that out. I don't think he's someone if he was left open, that teams would just be like, "Oh no." He's more of a streaky shooter, however. He is much more effective when he's hot and when he's in rhythm, as opposed to just necessarily being a catch and shoot guy. He's probably more apt to be have games where he scores somewhere between 10 and 15 points, and then other games where he explodes for 30. But that's basically what Bradley Beal was. So for me, that's a little bit of a wash when it comes to LaVine and Beal in this trade proposal. But again, the one thing that's holding it up, Bradley Beal's no trade clause. I don't think he would waive it to go to the Chicago Bulls or a team like the Chicago Bulls. However, it is a move that would save the Suns money. So the fact that, and I don't think the Suns are considering it either, but it's fun to talk about the potential ideas. And this is something that the Suns may want to look into down the road over the course of the season, depending on what's happening. Maybe the chemistry is not working right. And then that's kind of where you see, in that trade proposal again, the idea of the being brought up, the ones from Denver, the 26 second round pick from Denver and the 2031 second round pick from Denver being included into the trade. The Suns may be in more of a seller position at that point, or in maybe in a desperation mode to improve the roster if this is kind of what comes down the pike late into the season. But I think it's a good trade idea. I think it would actually benefit the Suns. However, I know that it's not something the Suns are looking into right now. Could they look into it later? We'll have to find out and see what happens over the course of the season. And we will be there with you guys as we move forward into training camp and into the preseason as we head into the start of the NBA season in October. If you want to make sure you're keeping up to date with all the latest Suns news and updates, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss a thing. And let us know what you guys think in the comment section below. Do you like this trade proposal of Zach LaVine and Nikola Vucevic coming to Phoenix in exchange for Bradley Beal and Jusuf Nurkic? Let us know in the comments below. But that's all the time I got for you guys this time around. I will catch you guys next time. See you later and go Phoenix Suns.